Today, I'm making a video I've been very excited to make for a very long time, and it's about untethering. And if you've been following my channel for a while, you will hear this term untethering being passed around a lot. And if you hear a lot of my client success stories, you will hear them talk about untethering as the key skill they have learned to get them to the results of reconciliation, but also why a lot of my clients, or pretty much all my clients who have gotten their success, don't really get relapses because of the skill of untethering. And you'll see them talk about untethering a lot here: detach from the outcome, fearless untethering for a breakthrough. Untethering is a bedrock for all the processes. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can also use untethering in a way where you can use it to reconcile, but also create a thriving relationship for years to come, but also how and why untethering will really revolutionize the way you do your business, the way you do your work, the way you conduct your life in a way that very few people can ever do. And I would go so far as to say that the people who learn to untether will pretty much have a guaranteed result in their life and their relationship, and people who struggle to untether will always find that their results that they look for, the success that they look for, the breakthrough that they look for is always just out of their reach. So I'm going to dedicate 2 whole videos to this. The first video right here, we're going to talk about what untethering is and why it's crucial. And the next video, we're going to talk about how to actually untether, the process to doing that. Now, a lot of you may be wondering, like, do I actually need to untether? A lot of you are watching my videos for a while and you might think you're untethered, but untethering, guys, is one of those concepts, just like a lot of the internal shifts concept that we talk about, that is really easy to understand conceptually, but really difficult to live experientially. So to understand how untethered or how tethered you are, I usually ask my clients these 5 questions. So number 1, what is your response when people ask you, for example, how are things going? Or how is your day? How are you? You know, if you talk to a lot of people, the response is always some outcome related things. My day was good or my day was bad because of certain outcomes or certain things are happening. My partner did this. But very rarely do people answer that question with, my day was good because I get to do a certain process. Very rarely, if ever, do you hear people saying that. If you find that your motivation to do something, to do a process fluctuates often, depending on how things are going, depending on how well or how badly, the weather, your partner's actions, etc. If your motivation fluctuates a lot, usually it's a case with you're too tethered. Number 3, do you get affected by your partner's hopelessness a lot? So a lot of you guys are in a position right now where your partner's telling you things are hopeless. And I get a lot of these emails where people tell me, oh, because my partner tells me it's hopeless, I also feel hopeless. I'm not going to try to double down on the process, to try to reconcile, to try to grow myself because my partner feels hopeless. Do you have a pattern of regrets from giving things up too prematurely? I know in my life, when I look back to a lot of my younger days, I started so many projects that I never followed through on because I just wasn't able to get enough motivation for long enough to go through the dips, to go through what they call the Dunning-Kruger effect, where things actually get harder before they get easier. And because I keep giving up things prematurely, I never really see things through and to their success. And I'm sure if you look back to your life, you'll see a lot of times when you have given up on things too prematurely, and then you regret it later. And the last question is, what thoughts get you out of bed every morning, and what kind of thoughts dominate your mind for the day? Is it outcome-related thoughts? Is it when you think about the future, for example, do you think more about the outcomes? Do you think about your dreams in terms of outcomes, what you want to have, the having? Or do you more think about the processes, your love for the processes? For me, for example, now, when I wake up, I think about the processes of my life, not about what I'm going to get today. Now, similar to a lot of my videos on internal shifts, I want to give this word of caution first. And again, you know, untethering, just like a lot of the internal shifts, are the concept that is really easy to understand conceptually, but it's really hard to live experientially. And one of my biggest fears, again, guys, is people twisting and bending my videos to be used for bad instead of good, or people underestimating the power of these internal shifts or frameworks and how much it can really change your life. So remember, again, right, there's a big difference, guys, between conceptually understanding untethering or conceptually understanding something and experientially mastering something. This is not like learning hard skills. When you learn hard skills, I can point to you what the problems are. We can both tangibly see the problems, but like with soft skills, and the reason why a lot of people seem to struggle learning soft skills is that it lies beneath a lot of blind spots, a lot of denial, a lot of ego issues. So a lot of people, for example, are more tethered than they think they are, but they never realize it because, again, it lies beneath their blind spots. And I want you to be careful of falling for that wrongfully certain trap. And don't gamble your time. You have one life, don't waste it. You cannot afford to basically learn, twist and bend and learn the wrong things about untethering and run in the wrong direction for too long. Your life is too short. And for a lot of you guys, your cases are on the brink of something really bad. So you don't have time to waste here. Okay, so I'm not saying this is sell, but there's a program for a reason. The program is a place where we can really dive deep into getting you from conceptual to experiential mastery. So if you can join the program, great, we love it. But again, as a lot of you know, we don't take in all the clients who apply for our program. So if you cannot join the program, either because there's no room left in our program or you cannot afford it, whatever reasons, I want you to use this space as a way to comment and engage. I don't want you to take, again, the wrong takeaways, the wrong learnings behind what untethering is. And as you'll learn later, untethering is one of the biggest and most misunderstood concepts that I teach in my channel. And so just be careful of that. There was a story where I talked to you guys in the last video where I said to you, there was this guy who applied for the program. He didn't get in, but he was telling me how untethered he was, how bulletproof he was. And I get a call from him, from his wife a while later, and his wife called me with a black eye, basically showing how unbulletproof and how tethered he actually was when he said he was very tethered. So please don't be that guy, and make sure you engage so that you can take away the correct learnings and the correct lessons. They're not biased by your blind spots, by your ego, by your denial, etc. And if you're new to this channel, we do talk about really deep videos around internal shifts and growing yourself, self-growth, for the sake of creating the best and most thriving relationship possible. So if that's something you want to do, whether you want to use it for reconciliation or just create the best relationship for years to come, feel free to subscribe and also click the bell button as well to make sure you don't miss any videos, important videos like this one right here. So let's start this in a very basic way by asking the question, what is untetheredness? Now, to understand untethering, we need to understand something called the conscious and subconscious paradox. So to understand this, I want you to do a thought experiment with yourself. I want you to think about something that you want, you consciously want, whether that's amount of money. Let's say you want $10 million. Let's say you want to start your own business. Let's say you want to whatever, insert the blank, right? What do you want in life? If you are really introspective with yourself, you'll see that once you consciously say you want something, your subconscious instantly admits that you don't have that thing. So as soon as you say, I want something consciously, your subconscious will say, I don't have that thing. I mean, the whole reason why you want it is because you don't have it. If you consciously say you want happiness, for example, you are subconsciously admitting that you are not happy right now. And what this creates is what we call a chasm, right? A chasm between the conscious and subconscious. And this chasm immediately creates anxiety. And I put that in quotes because anxiety may or may not be a good thing in your mind and body. And this anxiety, depending on where it is channeled, is the wellspring of either paralyzing anxiety or useful motivation. And so if this anxiety, this chasm is directed towards an outcome, that is really the root behind every single worry, hopelessness, neediness, spiraling, etc. Why? Because when your conscious mind says, I want an outcome, and your subconscious says, I don't have that outcome right now, and that creates anxiety, whether you can get the outcome or not is not in your control. So that anxiety has nowhere to go. That anxiety has nowhere to be channeled. You're just left there sitting in your couch, for example, and dreaming about a future and feeling bad about how you don't have that dream right now. If you want to say, for example, I want $10 million, whether you get $10 million or not is not really in your control, right? So no matter how much you want $10 million, it doesn't matter how much you want it, you don't have it right now. And you just dreaming about it is not going to get you that $10 million. But if you learn to channel this chasm, this anxiety towards a process. That is still anxiety, but that anxiety now has somewhere to be channeled. So for example, if let's say I've identified a process for me to get that 10 million bucks. Let's say I say, okay, if I do X, if I do Y, if I do Z, I will eventually get to my 10 million. So you say, I want to do this process. I want to do XYZ, which automatically you admit that you're not doing XYZ and you feel this anxiety, but this anxiety now has somewhere to go again, because whether you do a process or not is in your control, right? If you need to do XYZ and you realize right now you're not doing XYZ, then just go do XYZ. And so that's the moment when this anxiety becomes motivation and why some anxiety becomes paralyzing. And this misdirected anxiety, guys, is the root of every single evil or toxic behavior or thought that you have. Think about, for example, when you're feeling very needy and you're feeling like you want to check in your partner, you want to have a needy conversation with your partner, you want to over text or like spam your partner with messages. What is that? That is you having this anxiety, but this anxiety is towards an outcome. And so here your anxiety becomes paralyzing and you don't know what to do with it. There's no process in which you can channel it to. And that's where, again, the anxiety becomes quite toxic, quite unproductive. And so now that we understand that concept, we can go back to the question of what is untethering in its essence. And untethering, I don't want to overcomplicate this for you guys, because again, conceptually, it should be easy to understand, is quite simple. So on the left-hand side here, you have the having spectrum. And this is you wanting to have outcomes, circumstances, or you want to have certain people in your life, you want to have certain people's approval, whatever it is. You want to have something. Now, whenever you want to have an outcome, there is always a process that leads to the outcome. There is always a doing that leads to the having. And that's what we want to shift to. So we want to shift. Untethering is all about shifting your brain's addiction, your focus, your attention, your motivation from the having into the doing. So it's getting your attention away from outcomes, circumstances, other people, and into the intrinsic love for the processes to get you that having. So untethering, another thing that seems so simple, again, conceptually, but really difficult to understand and to do experientially. Because again, most are unaware of how blindly tethered they are, as we said before. It's also a chicken or the egg issue. So when people, my clients come into the program, they struggle with this. They struggle with untethering because, a lot of them come to the program very tethered. But, to untether, you need to do some stuff for you to have the outcome of untethering. But sometimes people are so tethered that they cannot do to untether, right? They're too tethered to do to untether. It's almost like, some people, for example, imagine a guy who's really fat, right? Who's really lazy. He's like 400 pounds. Some people may be too fat to even go to the gym to work out to get skinny so they can do more workouts, right? And some people never untether in their whole lives because of this chicken or the egg issue. And the reason number 3, again, is that falling nature is very difficult for people to grasp. Untethering is very much a falling outcome. And we'll talk about what falling and striving means in a bit, but we already talked about this in the previous video before. So if this is foreign to you, go back to the previous video to understand what falling versus striving is. But untethering is a falling thing. It's not a striving outcome. So falling outcomes in life are like sleeping, for example, right? Resting, falling in love is a very falling outcome. If you're sleeping, for example, the more you try to sleep, the more willpower you use to try to sleep, the further away from sleep you get. And untethering is a falling outcome. So some people try to untether by forcing themselves, for example, to love the process, by forcing themselves to say, it doesn't matter, right? I'm just going to do it. That is going to be very difficult for you to untether. But a lot of people, when they learn about untethering, they try to use a lot of willpower to try to untether. And ironically, again, that pushes them further away from untethering. So in a relationship setting for you guys, a lot of you guys are coming to these videos, for example, wanting to have a certain outcome of reconciliation, for example. But again, the more you want to have a certain outcome, the more you are driven by that outcome of reconciliation, ironically, the further away you get from it, because you're going to find yourself doing a lot of toxic things driven by that toxic anxiety that actually pushes you further away from that havoc. The key that a lot of my clients have, and behind my reconciliation, for example, and behind my success in my own relationship, is that I learned to shift my attention to the doing. I love the doing of finding issues, for example, finding problems, finding ways to create safety, finding ways how safety is destroyed, etc. I love the doing of that, the building, the fixing, the creation of a thriving relationship, and I intrinsically learned to love that process. I've rewired my brain for it. And so now in life, I don't really think about what I want in terms of outcomes, but I think, and what gets me going, what gets my juices flowing is really the intrinsic love for my processes. And this is again something people rarely have. So again, if you go back to this chart again, right, the crux behind untethering is that you're still going to have this anxiety. But this anxiety is no longer tied to an outcome, which is out of your control, but tied to the process. And that becomes very productive motivation for you. So for sleeping, for example, I do this, right? So if I'm having a hard time sleeping, I stop thinking about the outcome of sleeping, but I think about the process of sleeping. And once I surrender to that process and I learn to love the process of getting to sleep, sleeping becomes easy. I just fall asleep. I mean, if I were to ask you, for example, when was the last time you remembered the moment you fell asleep? Mostly never. Because the moment you fell asleep, the moment you fall asleep is the moment when you forget about the outcome of trying to sleep. Think about that. The moment you fall asleep is the moment you forget about the outcome of trying to fall asleep. And that's why nobody remembers falling asleep the moment you fall asleep. I do the same thing for my business. Whenever I want to achieve something, I don't think about how much money I want to make. I don't think about the milestones. I don't make goals based on outcomes. I make goals based on the processes, and I iterate my processes, and I think about the processes. I obsess about the processes. I enjoy the processes, not the outcomes that comes with it. In relationships, the same thing. I enjoy the process of my relationship, not the outcome of my relationship. Another way to visualize untethering is this with the spectrum right here. So on the left side here, you have the outcome tethered state. That's a state of neediness, when you need that outcome. So this is, again, when the chasm and anxiety is directed to the outcomes and the circumstances. This is why I don't like things like dreaming about your future, vision boards, wishing, hoping, etc. That stuff doesn't actually get you your results. So all these like vision boards, I don't buy it. I don't do that stuff. Because when you do this, it just creates anxiety, but the anxiety again has nowhere to go. And it becomes quite toxic, it becomes quite paralyzing. And this is again the source of a lot of needy, toxic, spiraling behavior, where I see a lot of people now, right, when they're trying to start a business or trying to reconcile, the whole journey is so anxiety provoking. It's so painful for them. Because again, they're too tethered. They're coming to this from a tethered place. And ironically, again, when you come from this place, you are very unlikely to get the outcomes you want, because love is a very falling outcome. If you want your partner to fall back in love with you, and they call it falling in love for a reason, because it's a very falling outcome. And if you are coming from it from a needy, from a tethered state, it's going to be very hard to fall. The other side to this, guys, is what we call the fake or hopeless indifference, or the indifferent stage. This is when you remove that chasm entirely. You remove the anxiety entirely. When you, for example, lie to yourself that you don't want something anymore. A lot of people, for example, because they see that reconciliation may be really difficult, maybe so far out of their reach, they somewhat convince themselves that their relationship is not worth it. It's not worth saving anymore. So, a lot of people think that untethering is about, oh, just detach from the outcome. But that actually gets them to the other side, where they get to fake or hopeless indifference. Now, this is a place where the anxiety doesn't exist anymore. And this is the birth of what we call the neutered male, where your motivation isn't there anymore, because there's nothing driving you anymore. There's no anxiety anymore. And it's also why a lot of women complain that men these days, they lack a lot of drive. They lack a lot of passion. They lack a mission. Because every time something gets hard, people take untethering the wrong way, and they just think it's about indifference. And to tell you a story here, I used to play college golf, and before college golf, I used to play a lot of junior golf. Remember in junior golf, there was a lot of people who, come into golf, they are very tethered. They need the outcome. They need to win. They need to see something good happening and resulting in their practice, right? And if they're winning, they love the sport. I love golf. But once they have a long stretch, let's say 6 months or a year where they're struggling, for example, they pretend like golf isn't important to them anymore. I don't like golf anymore. But it's not really that golf is not enjoyable or they don't like golf, is that they suck at golf, right? So because again, their doing is not really leading to the having, they convince themselves that the having is not worth it or they don't want to have anymore. And so many people in relationships are like this. Because again, they don't see that their doing is leading to a result, they instantly stop doing and they convince themselves that the having is not worth it, the partner is not worth it, whatever it is. But again, this is not untethering. This is actually very, very tethered. When you feel the need to convince yourself, to lie to yourself that your having is not worth it just because you're not getting it right now, that is sourcing and tethering your motivation to the outcomes. A lot of people have this misconception that untethering is just about detaching and just being indifferent. That's not untethering. Untethering is what we call effort and surrender. So you still want the outcome, but you know that in order for you to want the outcome, for you to get the outcome, you need to have 100% effort and surrender to that process. So here's when you are directing that chasm, that anxiety and desire directed to the intrinsic, let's change this, the intrinsic enjoyment to the processes. And this is really, as we'll talk about later, the secret to all lasting success in any field. If you look at any NBA players, legacy players who became legends at their sport, legends in their performance, dancers, singers, whatever it is, you will always hear them say, what? I got this good because I love the process of becoming good. I love the sport itself. I love the process of practice. I love the process of getting better, etc. Right? You'll always hear them say the same thing. And this key to success is the same thing in relationships. If you look at any of my client success stories who have been able to create lasting success, they say the same thing. I have learned to love the process intrinsically. Because I learned to love doing, the having comes naturally to me. And when you do this, anxiety is channeled in a healthy way, focused and productive way, right? Because again, whether you do the process or not is in your control. And it's again, the secret behind my success and all my client success. I'm telling you guys, if you get to this middle, you unlock something magical in life. But this balance right here is why people struggle to untether. Why I say untethering is an easy concept conceptually to understand, but really difficult to do experientially. Because as humans, our brain is really bad at embracing middle grounds, embracing gray areas. A lot of my clients, for example, come into the program very tethered, right? And they learn, okay, you need to detach from the outcome. So they go to the other side of indifference, right? So they lie to themselves like, I don't want my relationship anymore. But they deep down actually still do want it. So they go back to tethered again. And they keep flopping back and forth and never getting to this middle. One final way to visualize untethering is really like this. So imagine this up and downs as kind of the ups and downs of your life. Your life is not always going to go up. It goes in wave patterns like this. Sometimes the moments are good, weather is good, weather is bad, weather is good, weather is bad, right? So for a lot of people, when their situation is going really bad, so right here, if they're really tethered, their motivation can trough right here. So I get so many emails from people, for example, who are saying like, oh, my relationship is such in a bad state. My partner feels so hopeless. I feel so bad. So basically they're in this trough and their motivation is just shot. I don't see the point of doing this. I don't see the point of trying to improve myself. It's a lost cause anyway. Well, what happens if you give up during this trough? Well, you're just going to make this a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because again, you're not going to do the things you need to do to get it back up. And the same pattern happens in business, in sports, everything like that, right? This is the moment when people give up. But people who give up here are only tethered people. Think about it. Every single athlete, for example, have gone through troughs. But the best athletes, when they go through troughs, they double down on the process to bust through it. They don't give up. The reason why a lot of people cannot get success is that every time it troughs, they give up. And I made a video on this on why you should not give up during the troughs. When things are really hopeless, that's actually a really, really great opportunity, a really great moment. It could be a key turning point that actually will get you up. But because, again, a lot of people give up at that point, that's when people fail. So I'm going to link that video above my head here if you want to watch that video. Now, tetheredness is not always that obvious, though. It's not always that when things are going bad, you give up then. And so a lot of you guys are probably asking like, okay, well, right now, like my partner making it hopeless for me is making me want to do the process even more. That's also could be a sign of tetheredness because it goes the other way, right? If you, let's say, are very motivated, so your motivation peaks during this trough, right? It doesn't trough like most people, but it peaks. That still means that your motivation is still tied to how bad things are. And that's okay here. But what happens is when you eventually use that motivation, that tethered motivation, to get yourself out of this trough and into the highs, when things peak, your motivation will trough. The driver of the bad is no longer there. You know, a great example of this is what we call the tides of existence, right? There's a reason why, you know, there was a time in my childhood days when I was actually quite plump. I was actually quite fat. I was actually quite overweight. And the pattern I went through was also kind of like this, where if I, let's say, am really, really fat, right? I find myself, oh my God, I step on the scale and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so fat right now. I'm like 200 pounds, whatever it is. I will go to a restaurant and say, okay, I want a salad with no dressing, right? I'll eat super clean. I'll count every macro. I'll go to the gym and I'll never skip any gym days. But then let's say I do this for 3 months and I lose 20 pounds. And I'm like, okay, I can see the top ab now. Not too bad anymore. Guess what? Because my motivation here was driven by fear, but my motivation here is lost because that fear is gone. And now I go to restaurants, I go extra dressing, I start to skip workouts, right? I start to get complacent. So you can either be positively tethered. So positive tetherness is when things trough and your motivation goes down. So positive correlation there. But you can also be negatively tethered, which means that when things are going badly, you get up, your motivation goes up. But when things go well, your motivation goes down. But again, either whether you are positively tethered or negatively tethered, that's when your motivation fluctuates a lot. Your doing fluctuates a lot. And that's why, again, a lot of people struggle to break through, right? The most you can get is here, then you trough. Or here, then you trough, right? Tetheredness is why people cannot get success, if you think about it that way. Now, let's talk about why untetheredness is so crucial. And there's really 5 very key reasons why. There's a lot more reasons why, but these are the 5 that really is why I value untetheredness so much. And I spend so much of my life getting my brain to untether. So number 1 is that it's the key to modern day success. And, you know, the world has evolved to reward farmers now, but we've evolved to be hunters. We need to fight human nature on this to be successful. And for you to understand this one, I want you to think about the history of human beings for a bit. It wasn't until just a couple of 100 years ago that the agricultural industrial revolution started, right? Before that, we were hunters and gatherers. And as hunters and gatherers, we are rewarded to be hunters. You need to be driven by your immediate surroundings, right? If you're hungry, then you being driven by that hunger to hunt for food, and no matter what it takes, you're hunting for that food, that's a good thing. People live because of that. That is key to survival, right? If you are not a hunter, if you're not driven by that need, then you are going to struggle, okay? So we have to understand that for millions of years here, the definition of the fittest are the people who are most tethered, driven, and respond best to immediate surroundings. They're the hunters. So if you look at the parts of our brain, for example, the reason why so many of us are more tethered than we think we are is that our brains are geared to reward tetheredness. For example, if we do something today, we often want the immediate gratification tomorrow. And let's say for a lot of you guys, right, if let's say you're doing a process for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and you don't see you getting closer to the halving, it's really hard for most people to stay motivated. Because again, we're hunters. We want that immediate gratification. But Since the agricultural industrial revolution, humans no longer need to be hunters. They no longer need to be tethered. I don't need to be driven by immediate surroundings. And this is true in the literal sense of that word and the unliteral sense of this, right? So I want you to think about, for example, what it takes to get success today. If you want to lose weight, for example, if you want to get your dream body, you're going to do work for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years before you can get the outcome. And even then, the outcome may not be guaranteed. If you want to start a successful business, you want to be financially free, you need to work on your craft for sometimes even up to a decade, which is what I did. I worked on my craft for over a decade with no having, because I need to farm. I need to look at the long term here. And farming is like that, if you think about it, right? The seed you plant today you may not get the harvest till much later. And if you're looking at farming in terms of a winery, for example, you may not even get to sell your bottle of wine until 10 years later. Think about any sort of meaningful success, even in your relationship, for example, right? The seed you plant today with your partner may not grow until much later. Again, think about any meaningful success you can get in today's post-agriculture and industrial revolution. You'll always see that it requires a farming mentality, not a hunting mentality. So now we need to change what the fittest means. Now the definition of the fittest has changed. It's no longer about how good of a hunter you are, but how good of a farmer you are. So here we need to understand that our evolution has made us evolve to be very much hunters, but we need to be farmers now. So if you're talking about millions of years of evolution to be hunters, and only in the last couple of 100 years were we needing to be farmers, our brains haven't developed. Our evolution hasn't caught up. This is one area of life where we need to not follow nature. People always say, like, just do what's natural. No, if you do what's natural, we'll always be hunters. And why a lot of us cannot get that breakthrough, massive momentum-based success that we want. But we need to beat nature in this case, right? So your success in life, whether in business, in career, in fitness, in spirituality, in relationships, depends on how well you fight nature, and specifically how well you fight your tethered nature. Again, think about any successful athlete, performer, individuals, anyone who have become amazing, the top of their game. I bet you they cannot be tethered. They have to be willing to do the work for decades on end without a guaranteed having, without immediate having. And they need to still stay motivated despite that. And that motivation is because they have rerouted their source of motivation, their source of dopamine hits, satisfaction, away from getting the outcome into getting and loving the process intrinsically. Think about that very carefully, guys. This is magical if you think about it that way. Okay? So again, the only way you can really get out of this trough and have enough motivation to get out of this trough, and still, once you get out of this trough, to have motivation, even through the peaks, to keep going up, is if you untether. This is key. And the second reason why it's so crucial is that, again, it's the key to getting falling outcomes. And it's the key to getting following outcomes both in your internal state, yourself, but also in your life, in your external, in your relationships with other people, in your business, finance, career, whatever it is. And this could be a topic for another video, but this is really actually the key behind manifestation. Why? If you untether, you will suddenly find the success you want falling into your lap. It's not some magical thing, but it's because of untethering. And the untethering, when you untether, you learn to love the process of doing intrinsically. And when you love the process of doing, you will find that the having falls to your lap. This is the key to manifestation. But that's another video. But for now, I want you to think about this, okay? If you think about it again, any falling successes in life are by definition more high value, and you'll be compensated more for them. Okay, so let's think about striving outcomes, right? Striving outcomes are like lifting weights, right? Outcomes that you can use your willpower, your brute force to get that outcome. So think about jobs that are brute force and willpower related. What kind of jobs are they usually? They're usually jobs surrounding blue collar. The more weight you lift, the better it gets. But think about highly paid jobs, highly compensated jobs, highly rewarded jobs, managerial positions, building businesses, right? Spiritual type of jobs, right? Creative jobs. Creativity is by definition a falling success. Think about it. The more you try to be creative, the less creative you become. The more you beat yourself up for not being creative, the less creative you become. You have to fall to being creative. You have to fall to the state of flow to be creative. So creative jobs are by definition white collar or even beyond white collar. All right. So in post-industrial revolution age, falling successes are always more compensated. They're highly more valued. So if you look at, for example, internal shifts, and we talk about the value of internal shifts, of untethering, being bulletproof, they're all falling outcomes. Frameworks is a falling outcome. Relationship is a falling outcome. So again, the reason why a lot of people seem to stay stuck in their ceiling and they cannot break through to the amazing, incredible, unexplainable success that they want is that they haven't really learned to untether. And because they haven't really learned to untether, they haven't unlocked their ability to get more and more falling outcomes for them. And another dimension to this you need to think about too is that, if you look at any untethered actions and words will always seem more genuine and more permanent than tethered actions. So I want you to imagine here, someone is giving you a gift, right? And this person giving you a gift, is doing because they want to have something in return. Maybe they want a favor from you in the future or something like that. Can that gift feel genuine? I don't think so, right? But a lot of people do this in their relationship where they say the right words, they do the right things, but your partner can sense here that you're doing and saying those things because you want something. You want reconciliation. So you do only because you want to have, but you're not doing because you intrinsically love doing. No wonder your partner cannot fall into trust, into seeing your actions as genuine. Because again, it's coming from a very tethered place, whatever you're saying or doing. You may be doing the correct things, but it's just coming from the wrong place. Another example, imagine you're doing nice things for someone. Imagine someone's doing a nice thing to you. But while doing the nice thing, you can tell that they don't actually enjoy the process of doing the nice things. Like it's a chore to them. They're not enjoying it. Can you really believe that their changes, their nice things are permanent? No. How can it be permanent if you don't enjoy it? So a lot of people, again, they try to do the right things in their relationship, but they're not, but your partner can sense here that you're not enjoying it intrinsically. So of course, your partner cannot fall. So again, untethering is the key to allowing yourself to fall internally, to getting the right internal shifts, frameworks, relationship with yourself, etc. But it's a crucial step to getting other people to fall for you, whether it's fall in a romantic setting, in a trust setting, in a business setting, in a friendship setting, right? If you are tethered, everything you do will be very ingenuine and seem not permanent. It's very hard to believe it. So without untethering, your falling outcomes will always continue to elude you and you won't know why. So this whole notion of like just keep working hard using willpower is fucking bullshit. Okay, you need to learn how to untether first and base untetheredness as the foundation in which your work stands. When you do from an untethered state, that will yield very different results than you do from a tethered state. Okay, it's not just about working hard. Make sense? Number 3 is that is a key to leadership. An effective leader must be untethered. Tethered people always unknowingly choose to be followers, while untethered people always become leaders. So to understand this one, I want you to understand that your life and your relationship is just one big feedback loop, right? So what you do affects the environment, and what the environment affects your partner then affects the environment back, and the environment affects you, and so on and so on and so on. And this applies to every single relationship you have in your life, whether it's business relationship, whatever it is, right? And the thing is that you are already leading this loop. You are a massive and vitally important part of this loop. For example, okay, let's say that your partner comes home and she comes home in a bad mood. And so she's making the environment into this really tense, really negative, really dark mood. And you, looking at this dark mood, gets affected by it because, again, you're tethered to this environment. You get affected by it, and you end up doing more negative things that re-affects this environment, that worsens the environment. This worsening environment then causes her to do worse, and that causes her to do worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. You can see the point. But let's consider the alternative here. Let's say she comes home in a bad mood, affects the environment in a negative way because you're untethered, right? You are not affected by the environment. You define your own environment. You define your own internal state, and you break that cycle. And you respond in a positive way. And you contribute positively to an environment. And that makes it easier for your partner to act more positively. And you just broke the cycle. The key thing that changes is you. You changed this whole cycle. So what I want you to understand is that you, when you are telling yourself two to tango, when you're telling yourself that you are doing XYZ because your partner did XYZ, you are leading this loop by essentially letting this loop go in the same downward direction over and over and over again. You're already leading this loop. And if you look at a lot of your relationships, right? How did you get to the point where you and your partner are doing very toxic things? Because this loop has gone on in a negative direction for a very long time. So understand that what you do affects what your partner does already. So to say that it takes two to tango, to say that you can't change people is a bloody fucking lie. Because I change my partner's behavior all the time. My partner comes home in a bad mood, makes a negative environment, doesn't matter. I will create safety anyway. When she feels safe, she doesn't need to self-preserve as much, and so on. And suddenly, we're in a fine spot. People who are tethered, if you're tethered to this, you will not be able to help yourself, but to perpetuate the negative cycles you're in. The only way to break the cycle and start a new cycle is if you untether. If you untether from here, okay? You have to untether. And again, by definition, all leaders are untethered. I want you to imagine a leader who says, for example, oh, because my employees are doing bad things and that's making the environment bad, I also do bad things. A leader never says that. A leader says, no, it doesn't matter what people are doing. I am going to start my own cycle, right? So leaders, they don't let other people or they don't let the environment influence them. They are the ones who influence other people. They are the ones who influence the environment. But to do that, you need to untether. Because if you're tethered, you'll always be stuck following the script of other people and the environment. Think about that for a bit. And this runs so contrary to how people think, how people operate their life, and why success is so difficult for so many people. Why breaking cycles is so difficult for so many people, because they're too tethered. They can't help it. Now, a lot of you might be saying, like, this seems hard, Jeff. Like, you're telling me I need to have the strength to like fight the current and fight the current script and environment at others and define my own environment. Well, yeah, it's hard, but like I always say, right? If you want the life of a leader, if you want the glories of a leader, then don't complain about the work that it takes to get there. If you want to complain about the work that it takes to be a leader, then you're also saying, I don't want to be a leader. Then in that case, don't complain about living the life of a follower and not having the glories of a leader. But if you're saying to me now, well, no, I want to be a leader. I want the glory of a leader. Then stop whining about the work and how hard things are, right? If you want to be the leader, yeah, you will have to have the hard choice of being that leader, but you get the glories of being that leader. But if you say you don't want to be a leader, that's fine. You can take the easy way out now and let the environment, let other people affect you, but don't whine about how your life is a follower's life. See what I mean? Choose your heart. You cannot have the cake and eat it too. The fourth reason, guys, is this is key to fighting the paradox of change. The paradox of change is a rite of passage for all humans seeking breakthrough and success. Breakthrough is impossible as a tethered soul. For you to understand the paradox of change, I want you to think about this very deeply too. You know, all humans, if I ask you, for example, Do you want a better outcome? Do you want a better life? Do you want a better future? The answer is yes. Jeff, I want a better future. I want a better relationship. I want a better sex life. I want a better everything. And secretly, you also know that if you want that thing, if you want a different outcome, you have to become someone different. You have to act differently. You have to believe in different things. You have to do different things. You have to walk, talk, look different things, right? But the problem is this, okay? As soon as people try to become someone different, they instantly face external resistance and external doubt. Think about it. For me, for example, I used to work corporate, and I used to always want to be an entrepreneur and have that financial freedom, and have that ability to be able to have a bigger impact in my life as I do now. And when I left my corporate job in data science to pursue coaching in relationships, my sister laughed at me. I remember she was thinking, like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You are a data scientist. You know nothing about relationships. My parents were scared. They were like, are you sure this is what you want to do, Jeff? Right? Oh my God, the external doubt was insane. The same thing when I started to change myself for my relationship. I realized that the way I talked, the way I thought, the way I felt, the way I did and led my relationship was all flawed. And when I started to change the way I talk, the way I do things, you know what my partner said to me? She said, Jeff, you sound so fake. That's not you. You sound like a therapist right now. As soon as I tried to change, people gave me resistance. The same way I was working with this bodybuilder, and this bodybuilder, he was showing me pictures of himself when he was really tiny, right? He's scrawny. And he would say to people, like, I want to be a bodybuilder. And he would go to school. He would go to work later on, bringing his own meals, right? He would be like obsessed about his work schedule, his workout schedule. He would be like logging everything in his thing. And then he would say no to dinners all the time. He would say no when his friends asked him to drink. And people would tell him, like, why are you doing that? Because I want to be a bodybuilder. But imagine the laughs he got when people saw that he was still this scrawny guy. They were like, you can't be a bodybuilder. You're so tiny. Look at you. So again, as soon as you try to become someone different, you get doubt, you get resistance. And if you look at your life, this will happen a lot. And if it doesn't happen to you, if you find that people are not resisting you, that means that your dreams, your actions, your goals aren't big enough. They're still within that band, right? So again, as this is who you are right now, as soon as you try to become who you need to become, you will feel this tug pulling you down, pulling you down, pulling you down. And if you don't feel that pulling down, that means that you are not creating any distance here, right? Your ambitions are not big enough, okay? And this applies to everything. That is what we call the paradox of resistance. You want to become better, you need to become someone different, but as soon as you try, you get doubt, you get resistance. And that external resistance then becomes internal resistance. When people start to doubt me, right, in my business, are you sure, Jeff? I go, am I sure? I don't know. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe I'm delusional. Maybe. It becomes internal resistance. And this internal resistance can come from what we call the Dunning-Kruger effect too. Right? I'm sure you felt this before in your life, and I stole this graphic from an external source. So I'll credit that source in the description below. But I'm sure we felt this before, right? When you try doing something new, it seems easy at first. But then as you try to get into it, you're like, oh shit, this is actually kind of hard, right? And that dip right here is the paradox of change. That's you internally shooting yourself in the foot in a way. You're trying to change, but as soon as you try to change, you realize that that thing you're trying to change to is harder and more distant than you thought it was. That happens a lot. A good example for this was my business. I used to look at a lot of people doing YouTube videos, doing coaching businesses, and I thought to myself, like, that's kind of easy. I just need to consult, right? I just need to talk to people. Like, I already know my craft. But then once I actually started to make my own YouTube videos and make the business, I realized, oh my gosh, this is so much more complicated than I actually thought it was. Oh my God. So the ignorant right here, suddenly, oh my God, right? And if you're tethered, guys, if you're tethered, you're basically tethered to this external and internal resistance. And if you're tethered, there's no freaking way you can go through this dip. There's no freaking way you can go through this dip for long enough, at least, to get actual success. The only solution is to untether. The only solution is to learn to love the process of who you need to become intrinsically, that it doesn't matter how much resistance externally or internally you get, you will do it anyway. And when you do it, that's how you bust through to success. Last one is this is key to a peaceful mind. This is key to not only reducing the types of spontaneous thoughts you have, but also changing the nature of the spontaneous thoughts that come up. Right? So in the last video, we talked about this chart right here, where we explained to you the source of your spontaneous thoughts. So a lot of people in this universe are complaining about ADHD. More people today are suffering from ADHD than ever before. Why is that? Because your dopamine systems are addicted to the wrong things. For example, right, when you're driving a car, how many thoughts about the outcome, about circumstances do you have? A lot. But how many thoughts about the process, about how much you love the process, how much you love the process of doing, of practice, of growing your skills do you have? I bet you very fucking little, right? So we talk about that and how people have a lot of spontaneous thoughts and a lot of the wrong spontaneous thoughts. And because of that, their motivation and desire are directed towards the wrong things. But what if we can change the nature of these spontaneous thoughts to be about the process and change the nature of the motivation so that your motivation is now not towards getting an outcome, but towards doing a process? That is fucking beautiful. So when you untether, guys, again, you are trying to change your dopamine cravings, your addiction, your brain's addictions away from outcomes into processes. So when that happens, not only will you reduce the amount of spontaneous thoughts you have, but you will also redirect and change the nature of your spontaneous thoughts so that you are not thinking about things that constantly worry you, give you anxiety in a paralyzing way, but you are thinking about more things that actually give you positive motivation, positive desire. Another reason this is key, again, is that we talked about SOC the other day, about how SOC and state of consciousness is so crucial for you to be able to observe and grow your emotional literacy, for example, of your life, of your feelings, etc., to relate to other people better. Well, untetheredness is a crucial way to do that because, I always give this example to my clients. I went rock climbing one time, mountain climbing one time, right? And this mountain climb was so hard. And the whole time I was climbing up, all I could think about was like, how good it would feel when I go to the summit, how good it would feel when I go to the summit. So the whole hike, the whole many days of the hike, I wasn't even thinking or savoring, enjoying, observing the moment. And my mind was elsewhere. My mind was towards the outcome. Oh, it'd be so good if, it'd be so good if. Well, guess what? I got to the top. And once I got to the top, I was like, all right, I guess I could have seen this from a postcard. And I realized something, right? The moment I got to the summit was really 0.00001% of life. The process of me hiking was 99.999999% of life. And so if you are so tethered to your outcomes, if you're so tethered to the wrong things, I'm sure a lot of you have felt this, where you feel like you finally got the outcome you want, but then the whole many years it took for you to get that outcome seemed like a blur to you. Like you don't even know what happened. It's almost like you redacted the whole part of your life. We're like, I don't even know where my last 5 years went. That's what we want to avoid too. If you untether, that is the key for you to observing and living in the present moment through the 99.99999% of your life. After all, right? Why would you observe something if you don't enjoy that process? You can only stop to observe something and feel present with something when you enjoy it, right? And that's key for that. So untethering is key for so many reasons. And you can tell why untethering is really the key to a lot of my client success and why this is such a skill that eludes so many people. But once you master this skill, you unlock so many things in life. I cannot even begin to explain how many things you unlock in life. Now, again, I want to stress here that untethering is one of the most misunderstood concepts that I teach. And so let's do number one here. Motivation doesn't always mean untetheredness. So just because you feel motivated and thriving does not always mean you're untethered. Remember inverse correlation, driven by need of outcomes. A lot of people come to me and they email me saying like, well, I'm untethered, Jeff. And the reason why I know I'm untethered is that even though my partner's making me hopeless, I'm still really driven by it. In fact, the more hopeless she makes me, the more driven I feel because of it. That may not be untetheredness. That could be just the inverse correlation, right? But remember again, as we talked about in previous times, right? Sure, that negative correlation can motivate you through this thing, but that will become complacency once you get up here. So again, the key is untethering, and untethering is effort and surrender to the process. Intrinsic love of the process. Number two, indifference or detachment is not untethering. So pretending like you don't care about the outcome is actually a sign of major tetheredness. Untetheredness is a want and effort and surrender. So when people say to me, for example, I am not doing this program because I want to get my partner back, I'm doing this program for me. That can mean a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. It may mean that they have detached themselves or lowered their standards, pretended and lied to themselves that this amazing outcome is not something they want anymore because they just don't see themselves reaching that anytime soon. Again, it's like that kid who says golf sucks because he's sucking at golf right now, right? That is not untethering. Untethering again is like, again, you can still want something. I want my partner, but you understand that to get that want, you need to be having 100% effort and surrender to that process you've identified, okay? Again, lowering standards is not untethering. Untethering is not just detachment. I get that comment a lot. Oh, I just detach. No, untethering is not detachment, right? It's something in the middle ground of that. And it's really difficult to define, again, because our brains are really bad at understanding middle grounds, gray area, and we can only understand the extremes. So, when I debate this with a lot of people, their mind kind of goes like this. Let me show you. Their mind kind of goes like this. Well, Jeff, if you don't want me to be tethered, then okay, I just detach. And I say, don't detach, go in the middle. Well, if you don't want me to detach, then I'll be tethered again. I don't understand. Just keep flopping back and forth. Again, it's this middle ground. Okay, middle ground. Chimpanzeeing is not untethering. So this is a trap that a lot of my clients fall into, is that they may detach or become non-attached from one outcome, but they reattach to another, right? So a common one is this. I am not doing this to get my partner back, but I'm doing this program to get my future relationship. You just chimpanzeed. You let go of one branch, but you latch onto another branch. And finally, tetherness to random processes is not untethering, right? So I'm not just saying like, if you say untetheredness is about just latching onto a process, I'm just going to latch onto whatever process then. No, untethering is about learning to intrinsically love the right process. And the right process is often uncomfortable, unfamiliar, and difficult. So some people just willy-nilly pick and choose, like, okay, well, I like to do this. I like to journal. So I'm just going to tether to journaling. No, it doesn't work like that, right? Tethering, you have to tether to the right process for you to get to the outcome. Okay. So I know all this stuff right here I just said to you may be difficult to understand. Again, it's our human brains struggle to understand the middle grounds, the gray area, which is why I say again that untetheredness is really a difficult concept to do experientially, but it's quite easy to understand conceptually. Which is why, guys, if you cannot join a program for any reason, okay, I want you to comment. I want you to engage, and we will give you help for free. Come on, guys. Just don't make sure you don't misunderstand and don't fall into the extremes of the spectrum, and you don't misunderstand the principles of untethering here. Now, in the next video, I will go ahead and talk to you about the how to untether and the common pitfalls with the how of untethering. But for now, guys, I hope that was clear on what untethering is and why it's so crucial. Okay, and I hope you don't fall for the common misconceptions that people fall into when it comes to untethering. With that said, guys, If you want to, again, to join the program where we can show you how to untether, what untethering is, why to untether, and we can cut through a lot of the blind spots people have around untethering and make sure you untether properly to unlock this magical key skill in life that you need to break through to whatever success you want in life, then we have a masterclass on that. We have a masterclass that's about an hour and a half long. The link is down below this video, also up above right now. At the end of the masterclass, if you want to submit your application for the program, you can do so as well. Be sure to pay attention to the instructions so you can make sure to apply properly. So with that said, guys, that is part 1 of this part on untethering, and I'll see you in the next part where we talk about the how and the common misconceptions of the how. See you guys.